Desert air shimmered above the Mount Hale array as the night shift settled into its rhythm of numbers and yawning. David Lawson didn't yawn. He rolled his chair closer to the main console and nudged the focus controls like a safecracker, coaxing a pinprick of light to hold still on his screen. It didn't twinkle. It glided, slow, exact, across a grid of reference stars he knew as well as the freckles on his forearm. Guide error? Emma Hall asked, leaning in with a paper cup that smelled like burnt chocolate. No drift on the guides, David said. And the auto track is happy. If this were a satellite, we'd have a TLE and a glare spike. We have neither. Emma tapped a key to fan the view across 3 scopes. The light remained a perfect point, cutting a path against the sky as steady as a metronome. On the second monitor, a thin line crawled through a scatter of positions time-stamped in white. Check the radio feed, David said. From the far table, Carlos Garcia lifted a thumb without looking away from his headphones. Behind him, green bars winked on a spectrum display. The room's normal hiss met a new texture, a faint, tidy pulse you could have mistaken for a heartbeat if it hadn't been so patient. Carlos slid the volume up. Short, short, long. Pause. Short, short, long. The pattern settled into the room like a guest who knew where the chairs were. Emma's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. That's not weather. David felt a thin current of cold run through his hands. He told his body to keep typing. Time, azimuth, elevation, signal to noise, period estimate. He marked each pulse and watched the timestamps fall into clean rows. An alert chimed from the outer dome. Wind swing to the northwest. The desert carried a smell of dust and sage as the vents adjusted. Above them, the dish whispered a fraction of a degree. Cross-check with Hale West and the Rio Spur, David said. If this is local junk, the baselines will fight. Emma was already on it. Hale West confirms. Rio confirms. Whatever that is, it isn't in our air. Okay, he said, and his voice surprised him by staying even. Let's do the boring things fast. They did. They ruled out equipment glitch by swapping in a backup receiver. They ruled out aircraft by freezing the shutter during scheduled overflights. The pulse kept time anyway. They pulled cloud maps, clear. Solar activity, quiet. The object ignored their checklists and continued its patient walk across the constellations, neither hurried nor shy. David overlaid its course on a solar system plot. It threaded between Jupiter and the belt in a curve too clean for a rock and too slow for anything domestic. Could be far, Emma said. Far and deliberate, David said. His cursor hovered over the log's title field. He typed, Object H211, Parallax Track. Carlos set the headphones on the desk and rubbed at the hollow under his eyes. You two hearing this like I am? Short, short, long? Emma asked. He shook his head and pointed at the blue bars. Yeah, but listen to the noise bed. There's a ladder under it. Very soft. Stepwise. David widened the band and saw it. A second structure under the obvious beat, like scaffolding hidden behind a scrim. He felt both calmer and less steady at once, as if the floor had announced it was, in fact, a slow elevator. Record everything, he said. No assumptions yet. The array's phones began to light up. Teachers with school clubs. A retiree in Utah with a backyard scope and a voice like gravel. A grad student in Chile who sounded like she was running while talking. David deferred press and took notes from amateurs, marking where the wobble appeared in their feeds and where it didn't. He listened for the shape of the story forming outside their walls. Emma returned from the auxiliary console, hair escaping its tie. False star dipped 2 arcseconds sunward and then corrected. Nothing natural does that. Carlos whistled low. If it's a ship, it wants us to see it. Or it's teaching us how to look, David said. He expanded the phase plot until its dots leaned into a line. The line sloped with grace, not because the thing hurried, but because it refused to wobble. That refusal made his heart count in 4s with the pulse. Say we transmit, Emma said, almost careful enough to hide the tremor in her voice. On a narrow band, low power, just a handshake. David glanced at the clock. 3:17. The hour when hope and caution share a chair. He checked their license, checked the outgoing chain, checked the text he reached for when he didn't trust his own urge to be first. We're not there yet, he said. It cost him a small pain to say it, which told him he was doing the right thing. We build the case. We wake the day team with more than a feeling. Emma nodded. Carlos didn't argue. The 3 of them worked. Calibrations, logs, crossbases, redundant storage. When the eastern horizon turned the pale color of old paper, David stepped outside to breathe air that hadn't been through a filter. The dome's arc glowed faintly in dawn. The sky held its last, stubborn stars. He pictured the path he had drawn inside, a thread threaded through a loom he could not see. He thought of college nights with textbooks open and cheap coffee cooling, of his father's way of pointing at Orion and saying, "There, look, you can always find your way with that." He thought, briefly, of what it would mean if this was not a trick of instruments or a cousin of a comet, but a choice made by something that could decide. He went back in. He hit save. He opened a new entry and wrote a sentence he had been avoiding because writing it would make it real. "We are observing a controlled body." The pulse added another beat like a quiet answer. Short, short, long. Pause. "Let's call Frank and Felix," Emma said, already dialing. "And Loop and Dean. If this is wrong, we want them to tell us fast." "And if it's right," Carlos said, "we won't be the only ones awake today." David looked at the moving point that had started the night as just another star and ended it as a question big enough to sit beside the sun. He didn't smile. He didn't pray. He did what the array had taught him to do. He kept watching. By mid-morning, the control room looked like a chessboard mid-match. Mugs on every other square, cables crossing like careful gambits. David Lawson stood at the whiteboard, lines of numbers marching under a heading he had written in block letters. Period, offset, drift. Emma Hall called out from the radio bay, "Pulse train holds, short, short, long, clean as a metronome." She slid a new printout to Carlos Garcia. "But there's still that ladder under it." Carlos nudged the gain and pointed at the spectrogram where faint rungs rose and fell. "See? A scaffold riding beneath the beats. It adjusts when we adjust, as if it's trimming to our frame." "Responsive," David said. He circled the phase plot with a dry marker. "So let's be predictable." They transmitted nothing. They changed nothing except the way they looked. Frank Harris arrived with a sandwich and a stack of Doppler models. Felix Grant brought code that could tease structure out of soup. Nina Parker patched the Rio spur into a tighter loop. Dean Cooper wrote a filter that shaved noise without sanding away the delicate edges. Felix's script spit out a sequence of intervals. 7, 3, 5, he said. "They're not random." "Primes?" Emma said. "Classic wave from the void opener." David nodded. "And that scaffold?" Felix layered both streams and frowned. "The latter is offset by a steady step, but every few minutes it slides a fraction. As our planet turns, it compensates. It's indexing us." On a side monitor, the object's track curved between Jupiter and the belt, then altered by 2 arc seconds and returned to its arc like a tightrope walker resetting balance. Phones rang, they let them ring. Press could wait. "Assume for a second it wants a handshake," Nina said. "What's the least arrogant first move?" "Count," David said. He drew dots on the board. 1, 2, 3, 10. Then geometry. Then a local map with the star you care most about blinking. "Us," Emma said. "And keep it simple," Carlos added. "No art. No jokes." Agent Stephen Ward arrived with 2 colleagues and an expression that managed to be courteous and tired at once. "We're not here to shut you down," he said, pocketing his ID before anyone asked. "We're here to keep the world from tripping on your feet." "Fair?" David said. "Pull up a chair." Ward set a rugged laptop on a spare station. On his screen, a military track matched the array's plots. "We saw the 2 arc-second feint over the Pacific," he said. "Navy caught it too. You've got friends on every coast." "We plan to transmit," Emma said. "On whose authority?" Ward asked. David met his eyes. "On ours, if it's safe and repeatable and supported by data. We're not cowboys." Ward considered that and gave a small nod. "Then show me the part that makes you sure you're not hearing a wind chime." Felix pushed the latest overlay. The room speakers tapped out the now familiar beat while the screen showed the ladder stepping under it. Dean's annotation crawled alongside. Compensation matches Earth rotation to within error bars. A second window rendered a crude 3-axis grid from the ladder's offsets. "It's building a frame," Felix said. "Not just counting. Placing us, placing itself, then reaching into that frame with the obvious beats. Like tapping on a door and with the other hand drawing a map of the hall," Emma said. Ward's colleagues exchanged a look. "All right," Ward said. "What would you say back?" David had already written it in his head. He kept his voice even. "Count in our primes. Draw our frame. Show our local system with Earth blinking. Then wait." "Low power," Ward said. "Lower than a weather balloon," Carlos promised. They prepared the transmitter. Narrowband, carefully chosen frequency clear of aviation and public services. Power dialed down until the meters looked almost shy. Dean ran a loop back to ensure they weren't about to blast noise into their own ears. Nina set the clock. Emma cued the sequence. "On your mark," she said. David glanced around the room. No speeches, no handshakes. Just a circle of people who understood the weight of simple acts done well. He counted down from 5. Mark. Emma hit send. A clean, patient series went out, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, then a wireframe cube, then a simple sketch of the sun with small dots at correct distances and one dot blinking third from the center. They waited. The room did not breathe for 12 seconds. The reply came as if it had been ready all along. The ladder firmed, the offsets compressed, and then on the main scope, a new weave appeared, 3 pulses rising together, 3 axes neatly declared. A 4th pulse slid along them like a bead finding home. Felix whispered, "It's aligning a corridor." David's marker squeaked on the whiteboard, "Rendezvous?" He didn't put a period. He wanted the question to stay. Ward's phone buzzed. He silenced it without looking. "If that drawing says, 'Meet me outside,' we don't have a ship to meet it with." "It isn't asking for rockets," Emma said. On the spectrogram, the weave folded into a petal-shaped figure that tightened, paused, and tightened again, like a hand inviting a careful grip. Carlos exhaled a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. "If we were fiction, this is where lightning would split the sky." "We're not," David said. He felt the steady count in his chest, the same patient rhythm that had carried them through the night. "We're going to keep our heads and follow the math." The room agreed without words. Ward didn't object. Outside, the desert noon burned hard and clear. Inside, the array listened, and the North Star wrote in numbers a message that could only mean, "I see you. Anchor here." Sirens didn't come. Paper did. By early afternoon, a convoy rolled up the dirt road, 2 white vans, a dust-coated sedan, and a truck with more antennas than sense. Stephen Ward stepped out first, tie removed, sleeves rolled, eyes calm. "We're not here to pull plugs," he said as he crossed the control room. "We're here to keep your work from causing an accident at global scale." "Then you'll like our power limits," Emma said, pointing to the meter that barely blushed when they transmitted. Ward set a folder on the table. "Coordination nodes. If you see anything that implies approach, we bring in air and orbital traffic control before anyone moves." David nodded, grateful for a rule that made the air steadier. "We also want outside minds. Math, code, linguistics." "I brought a few," Ward said. They filed in with backpacks and notebooks. Noor Singh, who greeted the spectrum display like an old friend, Felix Grant, already here but now deputized as translator by code, and Ivanov from a partner observatory, face windburned, smile brief. Noor studied the petal-shaped weave on the screen. "If I were a ship asking for a handshake, this is how I'd draw the corridor. It's forgiving at the edges, tight at center." "Forgiving sounds friendly," Carlos said. "Or careful," Noor replied. "Both are good." They ran a second exchange. "Primes, a cube, the planet sketch." The reply rewove the petal, then nudged it, as if the writer had considered their posture and made room. Dean set a marker on the whiteboard. "Question. If the corridor lands here, what does here mean? Latitude, longitude, altitude." Felix tapped the ladder under the main beat. "Those offsets give planes. Cross them and you get a line through air. The petal tightens where the line meets ground." "Show me the intersection," David said. The model resolved to a dot a few kilometers south of the array, on a ridge with enough flat ground to host a football game and enough emptiness to keep bystanders away. Ward spoke into his radio. "I want a perimeter, quiet. No choppers unless safety demands it." "Are we actually doing this?" Nina asked. David looked around the room. Hands were busy, voices level, the rhythm of the pulse steady in the walls. "We won't invite anything," he said. "But we also won't run from the thing that is clearly already inviting us." They prepared the site. Trucks rolled out with sensors, battery stacks, and a dish tuned to the corridor's spine. Emma walked the ridge with a handheld scanner and flagged a rectangle the size of a tennis court. "Wind is fair," she reported. "RF is clean. Ground is forgiving." Sun took its time stepping down. Shadows stretched, then thinned. On the main scope, the North Star adjusted again, 2 arc seconds, then back, like a pilot tapping thrusters. "Quiet channel," Noor said, fingers poised at the keyboard. "One more confirm. Count, cube, local map, then we show our ridge and altitude." "Do it," David said. They sent the packet. The reply came faster than before. Pedal, compression, then a 4th pulse sliding along 3 axes until it found center and paused as if listening for their breath. Ward glanced at David. "If anything lands, no one goes alone." "Agreed," David said. He checked the list he hadn't admitted to writing. Emma for instruments, Noor for language, Felix for code, Carlos for RF, himself to be the person who said yes or no. He added one more, Frank, to look bored and notice what everyone else missed. The ridge grew quiet in a way that didn't feel like absence. Coyotes went still. Insects lowered their volume as if someone had set a fader down. Stars came on. The pulse held time. Then the sky altered. It wasn't a blaze or a roar. It was a subtraction. A patch of night lost its speckled grit and became one tone, deeper than black, round as a held note. The ground under their boots lightened by the weight of a stair or two. Emma tossed a small wrench toward the patch out of pure habit. It arced, slowed, and finished its path like syrup. Field effect, Nor said, voice hushed without trying to be. Not ours. A seam opened in the dark disk. Not bright, just less dark. A ramp extended until it touched the flagged rectangle without a thud. Dust lifted and drifted like birthday candle smoke. David looked at Ward. Ward looked at the team. 5 in, he said. The rest on comms. If anything flexes, we step back at once. David took the lead. Emma at his shoulder, Nor and Felix behind, Carlos last with the RF pack. At the edge of the ramp, the hairs on David's arms rose. Not from cold. From order. Inside, the air smelled like rain that had never fallen. Light had no source in every source. The corridor was not a corridor so much as a suggestion to walk forward, offered by curves that seemed to anticipate knees and shoulders. Panels shifted with a grace that avoided the word smooth. Surfaces are compliant, Emma said, pressing a palm to a wall that gave a millimeter and then held. Nor's scanner hummed. No ionizing radiation spikes. RF is a low meadow. Gravity a hair light. At the first bend, the hallway opened into a chamber where pillars rose like braided tendons. Images hung between them. Oceans, a city shaped like a woven ring, a red sky under a pale crescent, a river bisecting a green plain. Labels appeared under each view, not our letters at first, then our letters sliding into place as if learning on the fly. Felix's whisper carried. It's translating as we watch. A new pane blossomed, a blue world with white swirls. Lines overlaid it, thin arcs in tidy lanes, thicker bands that drifted and crossed. Emma leaned close. That's us. And that net is our own junk. Another pane stacked above it. Collisions, fragments, a cloud where an old satellite had shattered. Tiny labels marched like ants. Dates, altitudes. Nor read as the glyphs settled into English. Crowding risks. Clean lanes required. David swallowed. They didn't come to conquer, he said. They came to file a safety report. And to offer a tool, Nor added, pointing at a final image. A ring with latticework like frost, mounted on a frame, a column of air above it clear as glass. Footsteps that were not footsteps shifted the room's tone. A figure unfolded from an inner wall. It was not a person, it was a balanced arrangement of arcs and nodes, a geometry with a center like a cluster of steady stars. The chamber tuned itself. No mouth moved, and yet a phrase landed in David's head with the weight of sense. You called well. We anchor. You are early. The words were not sound. They were placement. Ward's voice crackled in David's earbud. Status. David answered without looking away from the figure. Contact. It understands us. It says we're early. Early for what? Emma asked the figure aloud. New panes formed. A calendar in an unfamiliar base. A timeline of launches. The rise of our traffic. The way our nets had begun to braid tight. Expected arrival, later. You advance the corridor. We cannot stay long. We leave seeds. We leave warnings. David felt a small, absurd laugh trying to escape. He held it. The room, the team, the sky, they were all inside a new sentence now. What seeds? He asked. The image of the ring returned. Under it, symbols that even before they shifted looked like instructions. A cleaner. A lane maker. The price is attention. Change the way you listen. Nor breathed out. They want us to learn their frame. David nodded. We can do that. Outside, the pulse kept time. Inside, the door that wasn't a door had already begun to teach them how to open it. The figure's light settled into a patient rhythm that matched the pulse outside. Panels around the chamber tilted as though a breeze had passed through thought. David glanced at Nor Singh. If it leaves seeds and warnings, we should answer with what we can change. Start with the frame, Nor said. Count, then geometry, then who we are in that frame. Emma Hall steadied a handheld interface at chest height. Low power tight beam. We bounce it inside the hull so nothing leaks. Carlos Garcia checked levels. You could whisper and fill this room. Felix Grant split the display. Left pane for their outgoing script, right pane for the ship's weave. We'll mirror. If it's teaching we show we can learn. David spoke for the recorder. Mount Hale Array Contact Chamber 1. Transmission, 10 units, Prime Series, 3-axis lattice. Local system sketch, add traffic map with proposed clean lanes. He paused, then added what mattered. Intent. We accept the price. Attention. Emma sent it. Dots marched. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Lines formed a lattice, edges tagged with plain numerals and an axis legend. A simple sun appeared, then small circles at scaled distances, the third marked with a soft blink. Over that, Emma drew corridors, thin, disciplined arcs that threaded through the worst of the junk their other pane had shown. For 8 seconds nothing changed. Then the chamber tuned itself like a choir finding the same pitch. The ship's response braided into a new figure. 3 pulses rose together, then a fourth slid along them until it clicked at center. The petal shape from the ridge reformed, tighter, crisp. Felix leaned forward. It compressed air. It took our lanes and trimmed them. Labels bloomed under the petal, glyphs pivoting into letters. Aligned corridor. Safe approach. 9 minutes anchor. 9 minutes, Emma murmured. Why 9? A fresh panel flowered. A diagram of Earth's shadow, auroral flux, satellite dawn lines and aviation corridors. Best window, the caption built itself, for you and for us. Stephen Ward's voice came through David's earbud from the ridge. You're not authorizing a launch in there, right? David kept his eyes on the panes. It isn't asking us to leave the ground. The figure brightened in modest increments. A new projection gathered above the ring image they had glimpsed, now exploded into parts. The lattice was numbered in base 12, edges bore marks that reminded David of frost under a microscope. Nor translated aloud as the captions adapted. Spool core. Field throat. Phase guide. This is the tool. Cleaner, Carlos said softly. A machine that makes lanes. The figure shifted the diagram again. A small version of the ring sitting on a flat bed pointing a column of thin air upward. Particles drifted into the column, thinned and bled away as mist. Larger bits nudged outward into paths that intersected atmosphere on gentle spirals. Felix whistled under his breath. Debris to vapor, hulks to decay. It's elegant. The ship sent one more braid, this time drawn like a contract on the wall. Seed drop, 1 unit. Anchor time, 9. Placement, your ridge. Custody shared. Price. Change listening. Nor folded her arms. Change listening means refit our arrays, adopt their frame for traffic coordination, and stop treating space like a garage shelf. Emma gave a short nod. We can start here. David looked at the figure. We accept placement. We commit to clean lanes. We ask for instructions sufficient to build more without you. The reply arrived as a stack of panes, each an instruction with margins that felt like advice. Material tolerances. Field limits. Orientation notes. A bold, simple warning, never point at surface life. Never point at habitats. Another line, never harvest air. Clear enough, Ward said over the channel. I'm seeing safety rules a lawyer would love. The petal tightened once more, then unfolded like a hand opening to show nothing hidden. The figure dimmed to a steady, polite glow. The words that followed were neither loud nor grand. They felt placed. We cannot remain. We leave 1 seed. We will listen for changed paths. Call again when your lanes are clear enough to learn more. David felt his breath ease without noticing it had been held. He set a hand on the nearest pillar. Thank you, he said plain. The chamber softened its lights, then guided them back by brightening the way they had come. The corridor seemed to learn their stride. A curve widened a hair just before Felix reached it, as if the room had decided not to collect his shoulder. At the ramp, desert night waited, cold, bright, honest. The team stepped down into a world that had not changed and would now. They cleared the rectangle. Coyotes resumed their gossip at a cautious distance. The patch of sky that had been deeper than black lifted, became a roundness, and then a pearl hanging just above the ridge. It hummed at a pitch too low to call sound. A seam opened on its underside. Something descended with patient grace. A ring on a cradle, its latticework like frozen breath, its frame proportioned for human hands to move but not to make. It settled onto the chalked marks Emma had left, clicked once and went quiet. The pearl rose. No fire. No roar. It shed weight from the world, then gave it back and climbed until it was the size of a coin and then the size of a thought and then nothing at all. Silence broadened. Ward broke it with a practical sentence. Perimeter stays. No cameras go live until we agree. We move the device only with the builder's notes in hand. Emma knelt by the ring, eyes bright in the red work light. "There's a panel," she said, "and it already knows our numbers." Nor crouched beside her. "Let's do what we promised," she said. "Let's change how we listen." David looked up. The pulse still touched the air at his ear, short, long, now with a low ladder under it that felt almost like a parting nod. He keyed the array. "Mount Hail to all nodes," he said, voice steady. Seed recovered. "We are under instructions. Beginning custody protocol and corridor discipline. This is not a spectacle. This is work." The team answered with honest words. "Copy on it, standing by." He turned to the ring one more time. Its lattice caught starlight, faint as frost on wire. He thought of the promise inside the warning. Lanes clear, calls improved, another conversation waiting past 9 minutes and patience. "Round 1, he said to Emma, almost smiling. "Still going," she answered. They began. They rolled the ring, crated, padded, revered, into Bay 2 beneath the array. Emma clipped her hair back and pointed to the ship's notes that now read like a manual written by a careful engineer from a kind future. 3 subsystems, she said. Spool core, phase guide, field throat. If anyone misbehaves, we drop power and walk away. Never point at surface life, nor read again as if saying it made it sink deeper. Never harvest air. Lanes only. David signed the custody log. Stephen Ward countersigned and posted 2 watchers whose job was to notice boredom and the small ways it breaks rules. Felix and Dean built the interface bridge, human dials on one side, alien margins on the other. Nina mapped a no-fly dome over the ridge. Carlos tuned a receiver to listen for the ring's own health murmurs. "Window opens at 2:11, Emma said. "Auroral flux is low, aviation corridors are quiet. If we're going to try a whisper, we try it then." They didn't sleep so much as set their eyes down for an hour. At 1:40 the ridge lights came up under red filters. The device sat on its cradle like frost-worked iron, its lattice catching starlight in thin silver lines. David stood with the starter key, a simple toggle that had become a ceremony. "Scope to watch," he said. "Links to nodes up. Media still out." Ward raised a palm. "One sweep. Grains only. You prove a lane maker by making a lane too small to brag about." "Copy," Emma said. They set the ring on a bearing that matched the corridor drawn in Chapter 4's petal, up through a low, empty wedge of sky. Emma keyed the base 12 menu the ship had labeled gentle. The field throat icons glowed one by one like a choir finding pitch. "Core at 5%, Carlos reported. "Guide is clean. Throat waking." 3, David said. 2. On. The column was not light. It was order, as if a clear pipe had been sketched from crater rim to the low edge of space. Air did not stir. Dust along the ground drew faint circles and then settled. On the scope, a cloud of sand-grain debris, paint flecks, and old bolt shaving, things too small for agencies to track, wandered into the column. They thinned, faded, and were gone. Felix marked timestamps. Vaporized. No scatter. "Larger fragments?" Nina asked. Emma dragged the vector a hair to catch a nut the size of a fingernail. It entered the column and slowed as if reading a sign, then eased outward on a coaxed spiral. "Decay path acquired," Dean said, almost reverent. "Apogee shaved. It'll meet air in 3 weeks and end as a sizzle we'll never hear." David let out the breath he hadn't meant to hold. "Stop there," he said. "No heroics on day 1. They powered down. The column softened and vanished. The ground forgot it had been lighter. Ward checked the airspace boards. No alerts. No pilot saw a thing. "That's either perfect or terrifying." "It's both," Nor said. "It means we can clear a corridor without writing a headline in the sky." They logged the run with obscene care. Then they ran it again a shade higher, catching another seam of dust and a curl of flake that had once been white paint on a long-dead panel. Each pass left a cleaner stripe through the low clutter. By dawn, the wedge over the ridge plotted as a slim, disciplined lane. David overlaid it on the ship's corridor drawing. The petal's spine brightened on the screen as if approving. Phones shook themselves awake across the world. The press called the ridge a rumor with coordinates. Ward's perimeter held. A senator left 3 voicemails in 1 hour. An old astronaut sent a text that read only, "Do it right." Do it right became the rule everyone could live with. They built routines. Morning sweeps for dust lanes. Afternoon nudges for pebbles. Nothing bigger than a coin for the first week. Nothing that could flash in the sunrise and draw a hobbyist's eye. Felix wrote a script that predicted when a nut or flake would drift into their wedge. Nina printed the day's pollen list on the wall. On day 6, Emma found David by the bay door. "We're just mopping the floor," she said. "We should ask to open a hallway." "Define hallway," Ward said from behind them. No surprise, he had learned to be everywhere. 2 degrees wide, low inclination, Emma said. "Shared by weather birds and supply tugs. If we carve that clean, we prove the model." Nor spread a chart. "We publish the plan first, to operators. Invite schedules into the corridor. If they show up, we honor the trust." David nodded. "We can't clean the sky alone, but we can teach how. And our price is attention." They sent notices not to the evening news but to the people who actually moved things above the world. The reply surprised David by how human it was. Small agencies first, then bigger ones, then a private operator who had a launch window he could not move and a stack of insurance riders he very much wanted to keep cheap. The ring woke to a new mode, not a pin but a brush. Emma swept the brush along the proposed hallway in short, patient strokes. Paint flecks fizzed, shardlets eased outward to meet air later. A bead the size of a pea took a long coaxed spiral toward decay. 2 weeks later, a weather craft climbed through their corridor and sent a note on downlink that made Nina tear up without warning. "Clean stripe. No hits on the micrometeo. Keep painting. You know what this is, right?" Felix said that night, pointing to the lane they had carved. "It's the first path we've made together that isn't a road on dirt or a line in water." "It's a promise," Emma said. David looked up at the wedge that now plotted as empty by design. Not absence. The Pearl's voice, short, long, had faded to a memory of rhythm. In its place, other signals thickened. Weather reports, science packets, a child's recorded message folded into a school project and scheduled to ride a balloon to the edge of night. He keyed the array and sent one message on the quiet channel the ship had shown them how to use. "Seed accepted. Lanes changing. We're learning." No reply came, not a voice, not a petal. Just the ordinary sky, now slightly less crowded, and a world that had started to treat its own near horizon like something you steward, not something you fill. Ward joined him under the dome. "How long until you ask to clear a proper highway?" he asked. "When the little lanes hold for a season," David said. "When attention becomes habit, not a sprint." "And if someone tries to rush?" David smiled without showing teeth. "Then we make the boring choice again." He went back to the log and wrote a line he wanted his tired future self to see when arguments got noisy. "First lift proved gentle. Keep it that way until gentle becomes the culture." Outside, coyotes sang at a distance that meant comfort had returned. Inside, the ring cooled, its lattice dim and quiet, like frost that had done its work and waited for morning. Bay 2 became part workshop, part chapel. Between quiet runs of the ring, Norm mapped the ship's glyph system into a grammar the interns could learn, while Felix kept finding corners in the manual that behaved like footnotes from someone kind and exact. "Next module," Nor said, calling them to the screen. "Archive primer." The ship left us more than a tool. The chamber recording filled the wall, pillars like braided tendons, images hung between them, oceans, ring cities, red skies, rivers. Labels slid from glyphs into letters as if remembering where they belonged. Emma pointed. "Pause on that band of lines across the blue planet." "Traffic nets," Felix said. "Ours looked worse." The pain advanced. A different world under a red dwarf, dawned so quick they looked like blinks. Arcs of debris thickened, then thinned, then resolved into lanes. Underneath, a symbol that had puzzled them on night 1. Zalmer, nor read as the caption settled. Not a person. A fleet class. Anchor ships and lane makers. They arrive, guide, and leave. David leaned on the table. "So they've done this before." "Many times." Another sequence opened, a gas giant shedding a faint belt, a swarm of objects departing in tidy waves. Names cycled beneath, Vorn, the Lin, Serath. Not heroes' roles. The story repeated with different skies, different errors, the same cure. "What did those worlds pay?" Ward asked from the doorway. "Attention," Nor said. "Every pane drills that word. Change how you look up, how you schedule, how you share." They followed a thread labeled custody. It showed councils that looked less like parliaments and more like weather rooms. Operators fed schedules into common boards. Lane makers answered with green corridors. Launches scrubbed when orange flags rose. In one clip, a small city celebrated something that didn't look like a parade, just a quiet evening where the stars were visible again over a bay. Nina folded her arms. "That's the pitch. Clear sky, fewer near misses, no fireworks required." A darker pane arrived, a ring misused. The beam grazed a habitat. No fire but air stirred wrong, people fell, then rose shaking and angry. Red marks flashed. A caption drew itself, slower than the others, as if asking them to actually read it. Never point at life. Never sweep along dwellings. Use cones. Use gates. Lesson written in someone else's scars, Emma said, voice small. They built their own custody room. No badges. No flag. Operators from 5 countries and 3 private firms joined a shared board. Schedules braided. The Ridge team published their day's lanes under the heading, Hail Corridor Rev 3.2. The first time a launch held for their orange flag, David logged the hour in his notebook without a flourish and bought too many pizzas with his own card. Pressure found them anyway. Talk shows called the ring a weapon. A headline screamed Desert Array build space laser. An influencer flew a drone toward the perimeter and learned that Ward's team could be patient in 30 languages and firm in 1. David answered none of it. He called weather stations and tug captains. He wrote bullet points for school groups that began "This is boring" on purpose. He posted graphs of micro-impacts avoided and let the line draw itself. In the second week, the archive primer unlocked a section labeled Frame Discipline. It wasn't philosophy, it was practice. How to annotate the sky in the same axes the ship had used, how to measure without inventing drama, how to share a corridor plan so a novice could read it at a glance. Felix translated the tips into a pocket guide with 7 rules. Emma taped them by the bay door. Draw simple. Publish early. Hold for red. Sweep light then lighter. Never point at life. Announce the dull parts. Leave room. Rule 7? Nina asked. Not just emptiness, David said. Deliberate room. The archive keeps showing that less clutter invites better ideas. On day 15, the board flagged a conjunction that made everyone's shoulders lift. 2 retired birds on crossing tracks, one with a loose panel. In a year they would have kissed in the worst way. In a month they might still. In a week, if someone painted a narrow arc now, neither would be where the problem would be. Proposal, Emma said, sketching a thread through the crossing in the ship's frame. A gentle nudge on the panel 3 orbits from now. It's within our margin. Publish and invite objections, Ward said. They did. An old operator in Brazil wrote back 3 minutes later. Bless you. Been watching that pair since May. At 3:04 the ring woke to gentle plus. A coin-sized flake drifted into the column, read the room, and yielded to the slow spiral the notes prescribed. No flash. No drama. 2 dead machines missed forever by a distance measured in polite exhalations. Felix stared at the screen a long time. That's the first collision we prevented that would have written a dent into history. Write the dent we avoided, David said, then write the habit we used. They sent a new packet on the quiet channel. Lane carved, conjunction diffused, rulebook spread, red flags honored, boredom achieved. That night, the array picked up a pulse like the one that had started everything, short, long, faint, not quite aimed, as if bounced off the edge of listening. It wasn't the ship. It was a university dish in Kenya trying the frame for the first time, sending primes and a local map in a tiny blink over their own mountain. Emma smiled at the speaker. They're learning to call well. Good, David said. Let's answer. They sent back what the archive had given them. Numbers, clear maps, a corridor plan with empty space labeled not in used but kept open. Across the board, small agencies began to publish in the same style. The patchwork found a pattern. At dusk, David returned to the chamber recording and paused on a pane he kept coming back to. A boy on a hill under an unfamiliar sky, pointing while an older hand steadied his wrist. The caption was simple. Teach how to look. He wrote it on the whiteboard above the schedules, not as a slogan but as a job description. Tomorrow, he told the room, we add a lesson for schools, how to draw a clean corridor with a pencil and a compass and why it matters. Field trips. Nina asked. Field trips, Ward said, surprising himself with a grin. Hard hats optional. The ring slept, its lattice dim. The ridge cooled. Above them, the first true hallway through low orbit widened by a hair, then held. And for the first time in years, a patch of city sky below showed more stars than last summer, not because the city dimmed its lights, but because the planet above had learned to tidy its near horizon. The shared board filled like a tide chart, green corridors, orange holds, a few thin red bars that made everyone's shoulders stiffen until they turned back to green. Bay 2 hummed with low talk and the clink of tools. The ring slept on its cradle between runs, a frostwork crown waiting for its next careful stroke. At 9:10 Felix Grant slid a new alert onto the wall. Rogue sweep, he said. Not ours. On the map, a narrow cone had nicked the edge of a commercial shell above the Indian Ocean. No harm done, pressure steady, temp normal, but the log showed a thin line of wrong. Emma Hall pinched the bridge of her nose. Who? Private outfit, Nina Parker said, scanning. Registered in 3 places that don't ask questions. They copied our frame badly. Stephen Ward leaned in the doorway, jaw set. We can reach them? We can reach their marketing team, Nina said. They already posted a clip with music. She pointed without looking at the headline on a tablet. Space Cleaner, we make room for you. David Lawson felt a quiet weight land in his chest. Not anger. A kind of math. We knew this would come, he said. We decide how we answer. Noor Singh tapped the archive primer. They warned us. Custody. Share plans early, call holds, publish dull work. But they also showed the panel with red marks. Never sweep along dwellings. Crowding by copycats makes noise, Felix said. Noise breaks the habit we're building. David faced the board. 2 paths. Lock the ring down and turn the ridge into a vault, or open the playbook so wide there's no excuse for bad copies. Open how far? Ward asked. Far enough that anyone trying this must adopt our rules to get results, Noor said. If you fail to follow them, your field won't align. The math itself becomes the guardrail. Dean Cooper rubbed his jaw. You want to bake boring on purpose into the code. Felix cracked a tired smile. I can do that. Before they could vote, another alert climbed the board. A fuel cell aboard a research capsule had gone off nominal. Not an explosion, just a slow, ugly drift of shrapnel from a maintenance bay. The tracks ran near a school's tiny satellite scheduled to pass over the South Pacific in 6 hours, a shoebox of cameras and kids' names etched on a plate. Emma's voice thinned. We can't risk a cone near a capsule with crew. No sweeping along dwellings, Noor said firm. Even if the dwellers are in suits. David stepped to the board. Options. Nina drew a thread. We can paint a guardrail beside the path, thin, offset, legal within our margin. The flakes that graze it will drift outward, missing the school bird. Publish it now, Ward said. Loop the capsule control in. If they object, we hold. 2 minutes later, a terse note came back. Approved. Thanks. A follow-up, less formal. Kids are awake. They're tracking their pass. Please help us keep their sky tidy. Emma keyed the ring to gentle, then gentle plus. The column stood up, not along the capsule path but a hand's breadth away like a fence. Pea-sized shards kissed the side of the field and slid outward into slow spirals the archive had shown them. Telemetry from the capsule remained steady. The school satellite crossed an hour later, cheerful and oblivious, and sent a photo of a blue crescent and a string of islands that looked like beads on a wire. Nina exhaled. Hold cleared. Felix tapped the rogue sweep again. Now about the showboats. Ward folded his arms. We could hunt them with paper. That takes months. David set his marker on the tray. We don't have months. We have a window while people still think of this as careful work instead of flash. So we choose. He drew 2 columns on the whiteboard, Vault and Commons. Vault means slow, safe secrets, he said. We become a choke point. We also become the reason others rush. Commons? Noor asked, though she knew. Open the frame, open the code, open the rules. Not the hardware plans, those stay under lock for now. But the discipline becomes public. Access tags, corridor grammar, event flags, failsafes, test suites. If you don't pass the suite, your field won't line up with anyone's lanes. Publish, then enforce by culture and math, Emma said. Ward considered the board, the ring, the people who had turned a ship's gift into a steady craft. He nodded once. You'll make enemies. Of noise, David said. I'm fine with that. They voted not by hands but by taking jobs. Felix wrote the test suite with checks that felt like seat belts. No dwellings within cone, no habitats within buffer. Announce dull work 12 hours early, hold for red even if it hurts. Dean built a validator that refused to spit out a corridor plan unless the plan included room. Noor and Nina drafted the Lane Commons document in language clear enough for a first-year engineer and pointed enough for a lawyer. Emma taped a fresh sheet beside Rule 7 and wrote a new line. If you must move fast, move smaller. They posted the Commons at noon with signatures from agencies and firms that had learned to trust the ridge. They held a call with the private outfit that had scraped their frame. David kept his voice calm. He walked them through the red marks in the archive and the rules that now came with the work. You can either pass the suite and join the board, he said, or you can go loud and find out what happens when the world notices you point at homes. Silence, then a cough. Finally, send the validator. Not grace but a step. By evening, 3 more operators had added their names. A university lab in Japan ran the suite and posted their corridor plan with notes like a lab report. A small firm in Kenya translated the rules into Swahili and sent back cleaner phrasing for 2 lines. A class in Brazil drew the axes on a chalkboard and read the names of the rules out loud. Ward joined David under the dome as the ridge went quiet. "You chose commons," he said. "We chose work we can live with," David answered. A new signal pipped the edge of their band, soft, familiar. Short, long. It wasn't the ship. It was 3 dishes staggered by continents sending the same little count at the same hour. Then a new block, not primes. A tally of green corridors held in the last day. Emma smiled into her cup. They're turning progress into a beat. David keyed the quiet channel the ship had taught them. "Lanes changing," he said. "Rules holding. We paid the price you named. We are paying it again tomorrow." No pane blossomed in reply, no petal folded. The answer was the board itself. Fewer red bars, longer greens, a slow accretion of small choices made well. Frank Harris, who had watched the day with the patience of someone who trusts logs more than speeches, added a 9th line under Emma's fresh rule. "When in doubt, call and count." He capped the marker and set it down. "Tomorrow," David said to the room, "we clear a second hallway and test the validator with people who don't like us yet." "Good," Noor said. "Attention scales best when it has to." They turned off the bay lights. The ring cooled. Coyotes trotted the perimeter and found nothing to chase. Above the ridge, lanes held like invisible rivers drawn on air. And across the world, a handful of dishes met the hour and tapped out the same patient rhythm, a small song of a planet learning how to look up together. Autumn thinned the heat over the ridge. The shared board looked less like a battleground and more like a train timetable. Corridors named, holds brief, handoffs neat. Lane Commons lived on 1,000 desktops. The validator refused to bless plans that forgot to leave room. "Second hallway holds," Nina Parker said, tapping the map. 3 weatherbirds, 2 resupply tugs, 0 close passes. Felix Grant added a note under the graph. "Boredom achieved, day 23. Emma Hall laughed into her sleeve. "Frame discipline is trending. Never thought I'd say that." Stephen Ward slid a folder across the table. "Reports from the copycats." 2 passed the suite and joined the board. 1 failed twice, posted a sulk, then hired someone who could read. "Culture doing its work," Noor Singh said. She set a mug on the rule sheet and traced Rule 9 with a finger. "When in doubt, call and count." They had built more than lanes. Schools drew corridors with chalk. Small observatories pinged primes on the hour. A tug captain in Ushuaia recorded a sea shanty version of the beat and sent it as a joke that made the whole room grin. The ring woke each dawn for light sweeps, then rested like a tool that knew it was part of a larger hand. Pressure didn't vanish. A reporter trespassed and tried to film the ring through a gap, then wrote a piece about secrecy. A senator wanted a ribbon cutting. A billionaire offered to scale the platform. David Lawson kept answering with numbers and schedules and an invitation to sit through a 6-hour custody session without a camera. Some stayed. A few came back with questions. 1 returned with pizza. On a cold night just after midnight, the array caught a texture at the edge of the band, a weave David had not seen since the lift. Short, long. Pause. Then a scaffold that tightened with each second as if someone were tuning a familiar instrument. Emma turned her chair. "Is that?" "Different power level," Carlos Garcia said, eyes on the meters. "Not local. Above the limb." The board stilled. The petal shape began to draw itself on the spectrogram. 3 axes rose together, a 4th slid and found center. Not an invitation to come. An invitation to hold. "Anchor window?" Ward asked. 9 minutes, Felix whispered. "Right on the corridor we've kept clean." They did not scramble. They executed a checklist that had been rehearsed, mocked, and improved until it felt like muscle. Airspace cleared. Traffic paused. A message went out to every operator on the board. "Anchor pass above ridge." 9-minute quiet. "Hold your lanes. Watch and learn." The sky changed as it had before, not with blaze but subtraction. A roundness deepened above the ridge. Weight eased from ankles and returned. Coyotes went silent in the chaparral. No ramp this time. Instead, a drift of pale threads fell like slow rain and drew together on the chalked rectangle. A wafer the size of both hands, a book of light that closed as it touched ground. "Seed?" Nina asked, breath thin. Noor lifted the wafer with care. Symbols flowed across its face, then steadied into letters. Archive Delta. Updates, validator keys, history. A second line, lanes improved. Price honored. David didn't realize he'd smiled until his cheeks ached. They watched, he said. The pearl rose. The petal loosened. The sky became only sky again. A gust moved the sage. The ring on its cradle hummed once and went quiet, as if recognizing a cousin. They carried the wafer inside. It opened like a fold of thin glass to reveal panes of instructions and, alongside them, something that looked like a yearbook written by engineers. Lanes carved on far worlds, collisions that never happened because a rule had held, calendars with dull squares proudly checked off. One pane showed a small city's night sky bright with stars it had not seen in a generation. Another showed a basket-shaped spaceport that had learned to paint its own corridors and had thrown itself a party where the speeches were all 5 minutes long. Felix blinked hard. "They're giving us the next exams," he said. "And a scrapbook. Anything we can't meet?" Ward asked. Norris scrolled. 2 new rules. One we already live. Announce failures as clearly as successes. The other we've implied but never wrote. Share custody with people who disagree with you and keep the schedule anyway. Put it on the door, Emma said. They added Rule 10 and Rule 11 to the list by the bay. Report misses, not just hits. Share lanes with critics. Keep time together. The wafer's validator keys unlocked a second mode in the ring, a gate setting the archive had hinted at and then withheld. Not a stronger beam, a safer fence. It could paint negative space, a narrow, invisible do not cross that other rings would read automatically and obey. Guardrails we can draw without shouting, Dean Cooper said. That's the fix for the next wave of showboats. They tested gate mode with a whisper, then posted the results and the code path to the Commons. In 2 days, 3 labs on 3 continents contributed improvements. In 4, a private firm that had been their loudest skeptic published a corridor plan that passed every check and credited the validator. In a week, the board's green bars began to look both longer and less heroic. A month later, a museum in Nairobi opened a small room called How We Look Up. The first display was not the ring or the wafer or a glow of alien script. It was a whiteboard with 11 rules, written in 3 hands, translated into many languages. The last plaque was a promise. This will change again when we learn better. Will they come back? Nina asked one quiet evening under the dome. David thought of the petal, the 9-minute windows, the way the ship's grammar had taught them to make steadiness feel like music. He didn't look mystical. He pointed at the board. They already did, he said, nodding at the wafer on the table and the long green spans that had once been jagged. And if we keep paying attention, we won't need them to fix what we contend ourselves. Emma leaned on the rail, chin tucked into her scarf. Round 2. Not rounds, David said. A practice. They logged the night. 2 light sweeps, 1 gate test, 3 holds honored, 1 school's tiny bird launched clean through a corridor with its name written in the margins. They sent a short message on the quiet channel, not expecting anything more than respect returned. Lanes improved. Failures posted. Commons growing. We're still listening. The answer arrived in a form they now preferred. A small change spread widely. Half a world away, a tug altered course by a hand's breadth to pass through a gate it had not known it wanted, because somebody else's validator had told it the path would be kinder that way. David capped the marker and set it down. He looked out at the ridge where dust lay undisturbed and up at a sky with a few more honest stars than last year. Teach how to look, he said mostly to himself. And that, more than the pearl or the ring or the wafer that glowed like a thin book of winter light, was what they kept doing.